Hi guys, Kiki here. So my project and research was based on Robinson Crusoe, and I wanted to connect his isolation to our pandemic and how we weren't really able to benefit from this. Although I can't speak for everyone, because some people were. But Crusoe was sorry. Crusoe was fine with it. He built a house, he domesticated animals, he traveled. Seemed like he really found his identity. But as for today's day and age, it didn't really do that. But I'll read my thesis. So the COVID-19 pandemic impacted many people, either financially, physically, or mentally. Despite there not having a virus in Robinson Crusoe, he still isolated himself for 28 years, constantly putting himself in situations he never learned from his own mistakes. And we talked about that a little bit in class. As for my research question, I'd like to compare the pandemic and how the quarantine affected people, just as it affected Crusoe on the island. Even though it wasn't as negative as it was for us, I'd say. Personally, I had a very hard time jumping back into the semester and finding the resources I needed to get through certain courses and even motivation alone. So it's very interesting that even though like it's a book and stuff, it was interesting that in that day and age, like isolation was more so necessary and needed in order to find yourself and really explore other things and opportunities in the world at that time versus today's day and age. I feel like we thrive better when we're all together or working together. We're able to not only help one another, but I feel like when you help someone else, you're helping yourself too, because you become proud of yourself. It's like a social dynamic thing. Anywho, two articles that I pulled and really enjoyed were one by Nina Maria, and she named it Robinson Crusoe Never Had to Meet Deadlines, Academic Deadlines, Scholarly Pressure in the Age of COVID-19. And the other one was To Quarantine from Quarantine, Rose, Robinson Crusoe, and I by Catherine Malbo. And basically the first one, the academic deadlines, was, like I said, it was really hard to jump back into the semester and meet these deadlines. I feel like the university was so lenient at the time with the pandemic and everything being online. Like teachers or professors were more understanding and just lenient, as I said, and submitted assignments, and you were actually home. You didn't have to go anywhere. So jumping into the semester, everything being in person, having to run from one side of the campus to the other, it's like tiring and mentally draining after a while, and you start to fall back in the semester. So I really related to that article, and I like how she just related his isolation and how he found himself within his isolation versus us in our isolation. It was very difficult dealing with like just being in your head all the time, personal thoughts, having to miss your friends, wonder what other people in the world are doing, or seeing some of your other friends still traveling despite the pandemic going on. You know what I mean? It's like that very interesting dynamic where you're stuck, but you're also still like working on yourself if you put that time in. I've personally found a lot of self-care habits and self-care routines, yeah, that kept me motivated throughout the pandemic. And I spent a lot of time with my family and siblings, and that was very good for me as well. But for people who don't have that, such as Robinson or just other people in today's age, it was different because they had to find other things to fill that time. So Robinson made a house, domesticated animals, traveled a lot. I do respect the fact that he goes back to the widow that kept his money, his pounds, what was like 50 pounds or something. And it just seems like he was only loyal to her the most, like, you know, and it went back to just him loving his sister a lot more than like his parents or something. He has a lot of respect for specific and certain people in his life that he cares for, and he shows that, because look what he did to Zuri and Friday. Like, even though they helped him, he, you know, still kind of turned his back on them and just gave them up. It was shocking to me, but I felt like that had a lot to do with isolation. Like, he only had room for certain things, and he couldn't really manage the rest, if that makes sense. So quarantine, Rosso, I think I said Rose first, sorry. Rosso, I believe. I don't know how to read French. But Rosso, Robinson Crusoe, and I, as in Catherine Malibu, the author of the article, she basically has the same argument in how she found a lot of time to write in the pandemic, and she found her voice through the confinement of her home. Personally, I still write a lot in my diary, so that is quite similar in the fact that she needed something to fill her time rather than just sit there and think about all these things that she had no control over. She relates that to Crusoe, and I'll read a passage right now. I noticed, this is, Catherine in her article. I noticed that what made my isolation extremely distressing was, in fact, my incapacity to withdraw into myself. I find this in solar points where I could be myself in 2 words. I am not talking here of authenticity, simply of this radical nakedness of the soul that allows one to build a dwelling in one's house. To make the house habitable by locating the psychic space where it is possible to do something that is, in my case, right. And I'll just skip to the bottom because she says here, to shelter in place has to be a radical Robinson Crusoe experience, an experience that allows one to construct home out of nothing, to start anew or to remember. I really like how she ties in a lot of what I was really looking into, just how people cope, how they feel like they've changed within the pandemic and the isolation, things that they found about themselves and other people around them. I feel like a lot of people were more wary of who they spend their time with because they want to make sure they're not affecting their own energy or affecting their perspective in life. You take after a lot of people you hang out around a lot. So I feel like that isolation gave us a lot of time to reflect, but it also separated us in a way. I mean, at the time we were dealing with a lot of political issues, so I feel like a lot of people were or still are a little on edge. You know, for example, like you sneeze in class and everyone's just like, you know what I mean? Like it's the tension's there, but I don't think the intentions are meant to be rude. I feel like there's just a little bit of fear that struck us during the pandemic. But I found this project to be really interesting to research and a little tricky at times because there was a lot of article searches and reading that I had to go through because the minute I thought I found one, it wasn't even the one I wanted. But I'm glad that I kept with it and it came out the way I wanted. And Robinson Crusoe, sorry. Yeah. I don't know if you guys think this, but he looks like Keanu Reeves. And maybe that's just me, but that was also something I wanted to point out. Aside from that, I thought it was a really crazy read, crazy in the sense of that he spent so much time talking about like making bread or building a canoe or something. It reminds me of this book, Swan's Way, and I've mentioned that earlier in the semester too. The authors have a very fascinating way of getting the reader to understand the character and really get into their mind, and you know what I mean. But that's my research project. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a great night and happy holidays. Thank you.